There is a paradox at the heart of humans. The more we try to escape unhappiness, the more deeply we become trapped by it. We run, we resist, we cover it with distractions, ambitions, noise, and endless activity. Yet in that very resistance, unhappiness grows stronger, and happiness feels ever further away. True happiness does not begin with chasing after joy. It begins with something far more radical, far more simple: the acceptance of unhappiness itself. When unhappiness arises, the first impulse is almost always resistance. The mind says, "This should not be happening. I must get rid of this feeling. I must fix it." That resistance becomes a wall, a constant tension between what is and what we wish were different. In that tension, unhappiness grows stronger. What could have been a passing cloud now feels like a storm that refuses to leave. The simple act of fighting against discomfort gives it more power than it ever truly had. Notice how this plays out in daily life. A moment of sadness arrives, but instead of allowing it, we begin to question it. Why am I sad? What is wrong with me? I should be happy. The questioning adds layers of judgment and self-criticism on top of the sadness. Soon the original feeling is buried under stories the mind tells, and the unhappiness becomes heavier. Resistance multiplies what was once a single drop of sorrow into an ocean of suffering. The same is true with anger, loneliness, or fear. When these emotions appear, we either suppress them, deny them, or distract ourselves with endless activity, anything to avoid feeling what is there. Yet, what we resist does not go away. It waits, it lingers, it grows in the shadows of our avoidance. And then, often at the most unexpected time, it surfaces again, stronger than before. If you observe carefully, you will see that the pain itself is rarely as unbearable as the struggle against it. A wave of sadness, if simply felt, passes through the body like a breeze moving across the sky. But when the mind resists, clings, or rejects, the sadness hardens into suffering. It becomes an identity. I am unhappy. I am broken. In truth, you are not unhappiness itself. You are the awareness that notices it. The secret is not to fight, but to allow. To let unhappiness be present without adding the weight of judgment or the urgency to escape. When resistance drops, something unexpected happens. The energy of the emotion begins to move, to soften, to dissolve. What felt unbearable becomes lighter, because it no longer has to fight against your inner rejection. This is why resistance intensifies suffering. Life in its raw form is not the enemy. It is the mind's refusal of life that creates deeper pain. By noticing this simple truth, you open a doorway. The unhappiness loses its grip, and in that release you discover that beneath the storm of emotions, there is always a stillness untouched. That stillness is where true freedom lies. Unhappiness, when looked at with clarity, is not merely a burden to be carried, but a messenger pointing toward something deeper. Most people see it only as a sign of failure, as if to feel sadness or emptiness is proof that something is wrong with life. But unhappiness is not punishment, and it is not evidence of weakness. It is a teacher. It arises to show us where we have lost touch with ourselves, where we are clinging to illusions, or where we are resisting the natural flow of life. Instead of trying to silence it or run from it, we can begin to listen. Imagine a moment of loneliness. The mind immediately interprets it as a problem. I should not feel this way. I must find someone, something to fill this emptiness. But if you pause and sit with that loneliness, you may discover what it is teaching. Perhaps it is revealing the depth of your dependence on others for a sense of self. Perhaps it is asking you to notice the space within, the silence that is always there, waiting to be recognized. What once felt unbearable now becomes an invitation to come home to yourself. The same can be seen with anger. Anger is often dismissed as destructive. Yet if you allow yourself to witness it without judgment, it can teach you. It may reveal old wounds, unhealed pain, or boundaries that have been ignored. Instead of exploding outward or being suppressed inward, anger can point the way to greater awareness of what has been neglected in your life. Even despair has a voice if you are willing to listen. It may be urging you to let go of an old identity that no longer serves you. It may be showing you that the outer things you chase so desperately cannot provide lasting fulfillment. The despair, heavy as it feels, is a teacher urging you to look beyond the surface, toward the deeper truth of who you are. When unhappiness is embraced as a teacher, its grip softens. You begin to see that each difficult emotion is a guide, a reminder that life is offering you the chance to awaken. The very pain you once cursed becomes the doorway to greater clarity. The unhappiness is not the end of the path, but the signpost pointing you inward. What you resist blinds you, but what you accept illuminates you. And slowly, with patience, you realize that unhappiness was never against you. It was always guiding you back to yourself, back to the stillness where true happiness quietly waits. Life is never just one thing. It is a constant dance between opposites, a movement of light and shadow, calm and storm, joy and sorrow. To desire only joy while rejecting sorrow is to desire a sky with only sunshine and no rain. But without the rain there would be no growth. Without the night, we would never recognize the brilliance of the day. This duality is not a mistake, it is the very rhythm of existence. When you begin to see unhappiness as part of this natural balance, you no longer fear it, and in that acceptance, a deeper harmony is born within you. Consider how the seasons unfold. Spring brings renewal, summer brings abundance, autumn brings release, and winter brings stillness. Each season has its purpose, and none is more important than the other. In the same way, moments of joy uplift us, but moments of sorrow deepen us. They carve out space within the soul for greater compassion, for greater understanding. If life were only ease and laughter, the heart would remain shallow, untouched by the richness that struggle and pain reveal. When a storm passes through the sky itself is never harmed. It allows the storm, it holds the storm, and then it returns to stillness. Your inner being is much like that sky. Unhappiness is simply a storm passing through. If you accept it as part of life's dual nature, you realize that no storm can destroy the vastness of who you are. Fear dissolves because you no longer expect life to be only sunshine. You know that both belong and both have their place. In truth, it is the very contrast between happiness and unhappiness that awakens us to the depth of life. The sweetness of joy is often felt most deeply after the heaviness of sorrow. The light is most radiant after the night. Without contrast, we would take everything for granted, and life would lose its vividness. It is through unhappiness that we recognize happiness, just as it is through silence that we truly appreciate sound. To live fully is to embrace both sides of existence. It is to stand in the middle of joy and sorrow without clinging to one or running from the other. When you stop fighting the natural duality of life, you discover a profound peace beneath both. Happiness is no longer fragile, dependent on constant pleasure. It becomes steady, grounded in the acceptance that everything belongs. Both the storm and the sunlight are part of the same sky, and both are part of the wholeness that you already are. Unhappiness often feels overwhelming because we mistake it for our identity. The mind says, I am sad, I am broken, I am not enough. In those moments, the feeling merges with the sense of self, and we believe that unhappiness is who we are. But the truth is different. Unhappiness is not your essence. It is a passing state, like clouds drifting across the sky. Beneath the clouds, the sky itself remains untouched, vast, and unbroken. In the same way, beneath your sadness, anger, or despair, there is a deeper presence that is never harmed. When you sit with unhappiness in stillness, you may notice a subtle shift. Instead of saying, I am unhappy, you can observe there is unhappiness within me. That simple change creates space. Suddenly you are no longer the emotion, but the witness of it. The feeling is still there, but it no longer defines you. You begin to sense that unhappiness is temporary, while the awareness watching it is constant. This awareness is your true self, the part of you that remains steady through every rise and fall of emotion. Think of the ocean. On the surface, waves crash, storms rage, and tides rise and fall. But in the depths there is stillness. No matter how wild the surface becomes, the depths remain untouched. Your being is like that ocean. Unhappiness moves across the surface, but who you truly are is the depth that never changes. The mistake is living only on the surface, identifying with every wave as though it is the whole ocean. Once you remember, the depth within unhappiness loses its absolute power. This recognition is liberating. You no longer need to run from painful emotions or cling desperately to pleasant ones. Both are simply movements of life passing through your awareness. By seeing unhappiness as something you experience rather than something you are, you step into freedom. You allow the emotion to come and go without it becoming your identity. The suffering softens because it no longer defines your worth or your existence. Even in moments when unhappiness feels heavy, a part of you knows this too shall pass. That knowing is not just comfort, it is truth. Every emotion is transient, but the awareness of it is eternal. The unhappiness is real as an experience, but it is not who you are. Who you are is vast enough to hold it, patient enough to allow it, and strong enough to remain untouched by it. When this truth becomes clear, the hold of unhappiness weakens, and in that space a deeper joy quietly awakens. Freedom does not come from controlling life so that it always feels pleasant. It comes from releasing the need for life to feel a certain way at all. The constant demand for happiness, comfort, and positivity creates an invisible prison. Every time reality does not meet those expectations, frustration and disappointment appear. The more tightly we cling to how things should be, the more we suffer when life unfolds differently. True freedom is found in allowing each moment to be as it is, without insisting that it bring only joy. When unhappiness arises, the instinct is to fix it, to replace it with something better. We look for distractions, achievements, relationships, or possessions that can cover the discomfort. But even when those solutions work temporarily, the cycle begins again. The unhappiness eventually returns, and with it, the chase for the next remedy. This restless pursuit becomes endless, keeping us trapped in dissatisfaction. But when you stop demanding that life erase unhappiness, you step outside the cycle. You discover that you can be at peace even when joy is not present, because peace comes from acceptance, not from control. Consider a river flowing freely. If you try to block it, the water builds pressure, creating turbulence and resistance. But when you allow it to move naturally, it flows with ease. Emotions work in the same way. When we resist sadness, anger, or emptiness, they build pressure within us. But when we allow them to move, they pass through without leaving behind the scars of struggle. Allowing does not mean indifference. It means recognizing that what arises in this moment has the right to be here, and it does not need to be forced away. This freedom is profound, because it breaks the illusion that your happiness depends on circumstances. When the mind no longer demands constant pleasure, it discovers a stillness that remains untouched by life's ups and downs. You may feel sadness, but you are no longer bound by it. You may feel joy, but you do not cling to it in fear of losing it. In both cases, there is balance, a quiet strength that comes from resting in what is, rather than striving for what should be. The moment you release the need for life to be different, you are free. Free from resistance, free from the endless chase, free from the fragile kind of happiness that shatters the moment conditions change. In that freedom, a deeper happiness emerges, not the fleeting joy of circumstances, but the unshakable peace of simply being. When unhappiness is no longer seen as a mistake, but as something to be allowed, it begins to lose its heaviness. The energy of resistance that once fed it is gone, and what remains is simply a feeling moving through you. To embrace unhappiness is to stop fighting it, to let it breathe, to let it exist without judgment. And in that gentle allowance, something unexpected unfolds, the pain softens, the sharp edges begin to dissolve. What was once a burden turns into a doorway. This doorway leads to peace, not the peace of having no problems, but the peace of knowing that even within difficulty, you remain whole. When you no longer say, "This should not be here," you create space around the emotion. In that space, unhappiness cannot dominate you. It may still be present, but it is surrounded by a larger presence, the stillness of awareness itself. That stillness is untouched, unbroken, and it carries a quiet joy that does not depend on circumstances. Think of a storm passing over a mountain. The storm may be fierce, but the mountain remains unmoved, rooted in its being. In the same way, when unhappiness is embraced rather than rejected, you begin to discover the mountain within yourself. You recognize that you are not the storm of your feelings, but the vastness that holds them. This recognition does not erase unhappiness instantly, but it transforms your relationship with it. Instead of being consumed by it, you allow it to pass, knowing it has no power to diminish who you are. From this acceptance, joy begins to emerge naturally, not the fragile joy that comes only when life is perfect, but a deeper joy, one that is not dependent on the rise and fall of emotion. This joy arises because resistance has ended. It arises because you are no longer fighting life, no longer demanding that it conform to your expectations. You have said yes to the full spectrum of human experience, and in that yes you have found freedom. Unhappiness, then, is not the opposite of happiness, but part of the path toward it. By embracing what is painful, you open the door to what